What is the most used man-made material on Earth? You guessed right. It's concrete. Look around. It's everywhere. Sidewalks, driveways, foundations, floors you stand on, and even entire buildings are made out of concrete. So why don't we discuss it more? In each episode of Concrete Logic, we will explore one concrete-related topic with the help from industry professionals that are shaping the future of the trade. We'll talk with suppliers, contractors, architects, engineers, specialists, and even some proponents of competing materials about their views of concrete and their vision of its future. And welcome to another episode of the Concrete Logic podcast. And today I got a special guest, p.fendley of the Active Minerals and also Add 10 Gallons podcast. If you all have been listening to the podcast, I was on theirs way back. It seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. It was like 6 months ago. But Paul, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Thanks, Seth. I appreciate it. It's good to talk to you again. Yeah, call me a special guest, though. Now everybody's got their expectations.
The bar's set.
Yeah, appreciate that. I work here at Active Minerals. I've been here for over 10 years. We are a mining company. We mine clay out of the southeast United States, and we ship it all over the world. We got a brand new HQ down in Houston, Texas. Excited about that. But primarily what my team is focused on is the implementation of one of our nano clays that has been purified so it doesn't have any of the bad stuff in it, and it goes into concrete as a superior rheological additive. So when we can go in here and we can help control the rheology and viscosity of concrete, we can do some really neat things to it.
Yeah. So I'm going to disappoint my wife. We're not going to talk about Tom Brady and his recent divorce. We're going to talk about concrete.
I'm glad we're not going into the Tom Brady Giselle stuff, because all I know is headlines that you see on Instagram. I don't know anything about it, so sorry, Miss Tandett. I am not the expert for that.
Me neither. All she said is that maybe that's why he's playing so poorly. So,
there's no doubt. There's no doubt. Has anybody look? I've been through divorce even at my young age, and when that's going on at home, I guess anything that's crazy going on at home, like you can't focus at work 100%. And why should it be any different for Tom Brady?
Yeah, no, exactly. That is the point I made Friday evening. It was, if things aren't going well at home, it definitely impacts what's going on at work. So,
well, and it's not just it's not just home either. It's anything off field that's a distraction. And one of the theories I have, like these young quarterbacks come into the league and they look like they're going to be awesome, first round pick, sometimes first pick overall. And people ask, we start talking about fantasy football or different things. And I tell them, I was like, pay attention to how many ads they're doing. How many companies do they have endorsements from? And how much time are they spending on making commercials and attending events and being on interviews that are not related to football? I was like, to me, that gives me an indication of how much time they're spending that's not concentrated on their craft, especially when you're a first-year player and things are going to be moving at an incredible amount of speed. And those people who are distracted by those additional endorsements, staying way away from them. And then when they start pairing that stuff out of their life, it's funny how they suddenly start to get a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, lucky for everyone listening, Paul and I are all in on concrete, so no endorsements here.
Yeah, no sponsorships on this jersey right here that I'm wearing. This nice Under Armour polo. There's no
yeah, that's nice. That's awesome. That I didn't. I guess when I saw and heard of you guys, I didn't think of you as a mining company, but that makes sense now. So let's talk about this Actigel and what was the origin of it? What problem is it solving? Can you give us a little background on that? And then I'll ask some dumb questions as we go along.
No, listeners, bear with me. I got a little monologue here because really there's two different stories that you just asked about. How did the product get started and what is it solving in concrete? Those are two completely different stories, and we'll put them together. So the product is a nano-sized particle that is derived from attapulgite. Attapulgite is a type of clay that's found in Georgia and Florida, mainly along the border there of Georgia and Florida. And the mineral that is so important inside of there is called palygorskite. And the palygorskite is just an incredible mineral that is rod-shaped, comes together, forms a nano, like 3D structure inside of an aqueous solution, and it allows things to not settle out. And so the attapulgite is full of this palygorskite. It's got some other stuff in there, smectites, bentonites, different clays that are swelling, but the palygorskite itself is not swelling. And so when you're using attapulgite, its main function is as a suspension agent. The best example that it gets sold into is paint. So guys like Behr, Valspar, Sherwin-Williams, those have been PPG, these big paint companies, those have been big clients of ours at one point or another for many, many years, decades. Oh, wow. And attapulgite goes into these paint formulations so that all the pigments, all the stuff that actually makes paint, if it sits on that shelf at Home Depot, over time it's going to settle out to the bottom and it'll hard pack and it becomes useless. They put the attapulgite in there, it keeps all that stuff off the bottom and in suspension so that when you're ready to dye the paint, it's ready to rock and roll. You just shake it up and you're good to go. The more attapulgite you're putting in that paint formulation, the thicker it's going to be and the better it's going to stay on the wall. So in my experience, I can't give away all the trade secrets of paint because I don't know any of them, but the way I understand it is that a little bit more of that attapulgite clay will actually make it increase the viscosity so that when it gets on the wall, it sticks a lot better. You don't get as many streaks. So it's a nice little thing. Huh. And so our former CEO, back in the year 2000, was in the lab, and he was on a mission to liberate that palygorskite from the smectites and bentonites and other things that are in there. There's also some calcium carbonate, some silica in there, and he wanted to see if he could get to that palygorskite. His goal was to make a super attapulgite. He wanted to be able to take a highly concentrated, just unbelievably powerful, potent version of attapulgite into the market and just set the world on fire. Pigments and coatings just gonna take over the world. And he did it. And in fact, the way he ended up doing was an accident, because as he was trying to make this, in his terms, was a highly dispersible attapulgite. He thought the secret to getting the super attapulgite was to actually get it so that you could disperse it more easily, because when someone wants to use that clay in one of these industrial manufacturing processes, you've actually got to plunge it with water, and you've got to get all these little bundles of particles separated out and actually get them dispersed so they can perform their function as a suspension agent. And so he thought, well, if I can get an easily dispersed or a pre-dispersed version, then I can have this super potent attapulgite. And what he accidentally did was found a way to chemically separate the palygorskite crystals from everything else. And so when you're able to do that now, not only did you make a super attapulgite in his terminology back then, but you also reduced the dosage rate. So typically, whatever formulation would use an attapulgite, you start using Actigel and you're using 1/10 or 1/20th the volume of mineral to get the same outcome. And any negative or disparaging effects that would come with a clay that soaks up water and holds onto it, those effects are now gone because you've removed all that stuff. So he goes out and he accidentally creates a product even better than what he originally was trying to do. And he starts marketing it to all the paint companies. Hey, all the coatings guys, whether it's paint for an automobile or paint that's going in a can for a store shelf, going anywhere and everywhere. Joint tape compounds got a lot of attapulgite in it. We're going all over the place. Said we got the best new thing on the block. And you know what it did? It failed everywhere. Failed everywhere. Not one person saw the long-term benefit that could be used by switching from the regular attapulgite to the super attapulgite. So went back to the drawing board. Said, all right, so it has these incredible rheological properties. It has interesting viscosity characteristics to it. It's isotropic, pseudoplastic, all these big fancy words. So what are we going to do about it? And what can it add value to that the market can use this product. And then we had a distributor in the Netherlands, brilliant chemical engineer. And this guy started putting it in concrete. And he started with self-leveling underlayments and self-leveling overlayments. And what he discovered was that if you could improve the flow of those bag mixes that are being made down in a little mortar mixer, you can make it easier to pump right into place, and it self-levels better. The bleed is restricted, it's controlled. Things were going a lot more smoothly for these people. And that's what the product did. So we took that knowledge, brought it back to the United States. They hired me, ended up hiring more team members. We developed IP, the patent on how to make it, how to use it in concrete. And then we branched out from there. And so the team, as I come to a close on this story, the team has gone through about 40 different types of concrete that you can make that could benefit from Actigel. But at the end of the day, the one that makes the most sense for the concrete industry is the ability to replace natural sands with manufactured sands, and the end user can't tell any difference that the concrete producers made any change to that mix design.
Gotcha. So then I guess what would be good for us is to dive into what's the difference between manufactured sand and natural sand, and why would you use one or over the other, or vice versa?
Yeah, so natural sand is going to be stuff that's formed naturally here on the earth. So sand that you're dredging out of rivers, along beaches. These types of sands are so good in concrete because they're round grain particles. So they're smooth, they're easy to work with, and when you're analyzing the difference between that and what we're calling a manufactured sand, it's not manufactured on purpose, it's manufactured as a byproduct. It's a byproduct from the rock crushing process over in the gravel industry. So these rock quarries taking gigantic slabs of limestone or granite or basalt, whatever they're using, and as they start to crush those large sections into smaller sections, you create fines during that crushing process. Those fines eventually accumulate, sometimes in the hundreds of thousands of tons, and you end up with mountains of these really, really fine aggregate pieces. And you can actually use that if anywhere on a gradation scale is anywhere close to suitable for concrete, you can use that in your concrete, and it'll make a very durable concrete. The reason why people aren't doing it right now today in large quantities is because you're going from a rounded particle to an angular particle. The manufactured sand particle is highly angular. And when you swap that out and you remove the round grain natural sand and you put in the angular manufactured sand, you've now created a concrete that we'd all describe as bony. It's almost impossible to get a good finish on. It won't go through a pump. It's just nasty, nasty stuff. So our product comes in and says, no, you can replace that. Not the 20% replacement you're doing now of man sand into natural sand, but let's replace it 100%. And the Actigel comes in and it adds a bit of paste to the mix, what feels like paste, and that little butteriness, so that it goes right through a pump. And when it lands on the deck, it is just beautiful to handle and finish. Yeah,
and with manufactured sand too, isn't there versus natural sand? Isn't there they handle moisture differently as well? Is that what Actigel kind of helps it with?
No, they can handle moisture differently. They don't always. It really depends on the rock you're using. One of the manufactured sands you could use is manufactured sand from recycled concrete aggregates, and that doesn't handle water well at all. It soaks water up quite a bit, and it makes things very difficult on you. Some man sands can also soak up water even if they're not RCA. They're just incredibly fine, or they could contain a lot of mica. And in those situations, there's absolutely nothing anybody can do. They're just going to soak up water, and you just have to live with it. In other situations, the gradations are not ultrafine. They're not full of mica. You just got a good limestone, and you can put them in there, and you can swap out those sands. It's just really coarse. And so people aren't swapping out the sands because they don't want to lose their end customer. because in most markets, you've got more than one ready mix provider. And if one guy goes to swap his sands out, because it typically makes a lot of sense cost-wise, and you swap it out, and then all of a sudden the guys who are, pouring these residential floors, slabs on grade, you got the guys who are pumping into these Amazon warehouses, and you're the only person who's made this sand swap. Well, everybody's going to be really, really angry at you because now they can't pump their mix and they can't finish their mix. And you just made life really difficult on all their people. And so you better have a way to mitigate those effects. And we're the product that's come along and made that possible.
Yeah, it's very, very niche, however you pronounce it. Well, so you were saying about swapping manufactured sand for natural sand or vice versa, the issues it causes. I was going to ask you, this active gel, we've talked about different admixtures in the past on the podcast, and it seemed like that using that admixture, that particular admixture would not necessarily replace others, but it did make sense to use it in addition of other admixtures. Is that the way you're describing active gel? It kind of sounds like it helps concrete pump if you're using manufactured sand. So typically we would use like a high range or mid range water reducer for projects that we need to utilize a pump. Are you seeing that for your customers that are using active gel? Are they still having to use a high range or mid range or super plasticizer, however you want to present it? Are they still having to use that as well, or active gel kind of helping out with that as well?
No, they're absolutely going to need the other additives. The active gel is a pump aid and a finishing aid primarily. And so where does it make sense to have value to need a pump aid and a finishing aid? Something that can not cost your company money, but maybe save your company money. Because our stuff doesn't cost very much at all. And so if you are in a situation where it takes quite a ways to haul natural sand to the plant, I'll give you an example, like Birmingham, Alabama is a great example. There's so much manufactured sand in that market. But the natural sand, the closest source is in Montgomery. For people not familiar with the scale of that distance, that's between 80 and 100 miles, depending on which side of the city you're on. So if you're having to haul your natural sand 80 to 100 miles in the last 2 years with the way trucking's gone up, imagine what the price of the sand is by the time it lands on your doorstep. But the manufactured sand's right down the street. So you can haul that a mile away and bring it to the plant, but you're not doing it now because if you did, you'd lose every customer you had because they couldn't finish it, couldn't place it, can't pump it. It's a nightmare. And you can overcome some of that with some mix design changes, using a little more rock, a lot more powder. But now all the cost advantages that you were looking for are gone. So we can come in and we can help with that. And so really targeting places, you said niche, feels niche because we're so targeted. But the actual opportunity and scope of the places that can benefit from this are not so niche. As far as the other additives, yeah, we're not replacing anybody. We want you to have the best high range, mid range, low range, whatever's best for your operation. We want you to keep using that, and as much of it is to your heart's content. The reason why this is a more effective solution than dosing it up, souping it up with more high range is especially when you're pumping. As soon as you get over that 7-8 inch slump kind of barrier, once you hit that 8-inch slump, you're starting to play with fire a little bit. As you've seen on some of your jobs, you put that 8-inch slump in the pump hopper, and it starts to want to segregate. Those rocks want to collect in the bottom, and it gets real soupy on the top, and you got to keep going. And as long as you keep going, you're probably going to be all right at a 7.5, 8-inch slump. As long as you keep moving, you're probably going to be okay. But the minute that you have a delay up top, hose comes apart, line dragging ain't acting right, or you got a delay from the concrete plant, and the truck's 15 minutes late trying to get back to you or whatever, and you got a bad delay, you're probably going to be in trouble at that pump. So what we do is we come in and put our stuff in, and because it's making it so much easier to pump, it's also, like we talked about the Attapulgite, it was a suspension agent for the paints and stuff to prevent the separation of water from the solids. It's doing something very similar in concrete, even though we've gotten rid of all the swelling clays. But that centeresis control aspect is still there. So you're controlling the separation of solids and water, and you're also essentially lubricating the lines to make it pump more easily. And when you can do both of those things, you're now able to create a concrete at an 8, 9, 10 inch isn't really a real slump, but let's pretend it is. So 10-inch slump that is holding together. And when you can do that, your pump pressures are just phenomenal. The guys up top are having a great time because you're not having to add a bunch of water and super P that when it gets up onto the deck, it's segregating out all over the place, and those guys are having to stand around and wait on the water to dry so they can actually get on it and finish it. You're not having those problems anymore. So it's efficiencies with both cost and production.
Is you would probably know better than others that would, or you probably would share before a supplier would. Is the natural sand and the manufacturer sand, is there a big difference in cost, or is it just basically transportation costs?
Depends on the market mostly, but let's just take some examples. So one good example would be Knoxville, Tennessee, where they had to make the adaptation 20 years ago, 25 years ago. They only use manufactured sand. They don't use anything else. They don't even try to bring in natural sand because it's so far away. It was cost prohibitive before supply chains went crazy in 2020. And so all their people just have to deal with it. And they try to put a little extra cement in there, but at the end of the day, people are just struggling and they're just doing their very best. And there's some quality producers out there. So it's not to demean them. It's just a reality of when you're using that type of material in a market, and they just had to get used to it. You've got other markets, go a little bit further south from there. You got Chattanooga, Tennessee, where they're using 50% man sand already in most of the mixes that are coming out of that market because they can get some natural sand. But they're trying not to use it if they don't have to, because man sand is so available in that area, but it's harsh. It's harsh. And to be the first person to make that switch without an aid like an Actigel or something else, then you're really going to be putting a lot of stress on your customers. And so the cost differences, so like Knoxville, there is no cost difference because there's only one supply of man sand. You get down to Chattanooga and freight becomes probably your biggest obstacle. So the man sand guys are doing their best to get value for their waste material, but then they're also having to make sure that they're cost competitive below the cost of natural sand. Because the minute that natural sand and man sand become even, it's not a debate. The natural sand is so much easier to work with. So they're going to bring in natural sand. So then let's go down just a third market you kind of analyze there as you're looking in that same I-75 corridor. You get down to Atlanta, Georgia. And Atlanta, Georgia, again, another place with no natural sand. They're bringing it in from 80 miles away at least. And these guys, the market is so hot. It's been so hot for the last 6-7 years that the price of the manufactured sand is nearly equal to the price of natural sand. I mean, they're off by like $2 a ton, which in the sand world, that's not a whole lot. So $2 a ton, and you have to use the worst material. So some people are still bringing in natural sand because they're like, you know what, it's worth $2. So I'm just gonna bite that bullet. And you use 100,000 tons a year, and they're like, well, I sleep better at night because my concrete's fine, and maybe I can get away with a little bit less cement. They're doing their best to be as lean as possible over there. So there's some areas where, and in that situation in Atlanta, where we've got a lot of friends that work over there that use Actigel for a lot of value-added specialty mixes, but they're not using it in all their concrete because they didn't make that switch to man sand because the costs weren't favorable. But you go into a market like Austin, Texas, where the market is very favorable, and so the low cost of our product is a cinch, being on the plus side of the economic scale.
Yeah. With you all that are trying to get an ad mixture into a customer's hands and convince them to use it, have you found I guess you would be talking to me today if you figured out what the silver bullet is to get someone to use your product all the time, or
prayer, Seth. Prayer.
Yeah. So how do you guys? I asked somebody at a podcast I released this week. I asked him the same question: what is a successful way for you to convince a new customer to use your product?
Well, if his answer wasn't prayer and the luck of the gods, then he's 50% of the way BSing you. All right. So I'd say. Sometimes it feels like luck, and what's that old phrase where hard work and opportunity meet? It feels like, you stumble into luck. I'd like to think that's what we've done. And so I can tell you that when we first started, let me tell you what didn't work, and then maybe I can answer what we found that did work. And what we thought would work is having a team of highly skilled people that go in and prove to you how smart we are and how great our product is, and that we're going to help solve all the world's problems. Well, that was absolutely the wrong thing to do. So anybody out there listening to this, do not ever do that. So then we took our team of highly trained, highly skilled concrete guys, where mixed designs are still their specialty, and we went out and became a lot more humble and said, all right, what problem do you have that maybe we can solve? And then you become a lot more educated on the market, the players, the different regions. So the problems they're having in Atlanta are not the same problems they're having in Denver, not the same problems they're having in Los Angeles. So you start learning a lot more about what people's problems are. And then the absolute number one key beyond that is honesty and integrity. And if you can't solve somebody's problem, just tell them. And if you can't answer their question, just tell them. Like, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll call you back. I'll go call somebody smarter than me and see if I can find out. And then once you see enough pain points, we were able to sort of map trends in different regions and say, this is a pain in this city, this is a pain in this region. These are things we can help with, these are things we can't help with. And so then once you've got a really good sense of what people are struggling with, and you've got a really good sense of how your product can come in and solve that problem, well, now you've got a market you can establish. So then we went in and tried to establish that market. And two big lessons we learned from that was, one, you've got to make the product easy to use. And number two, as a new product with a company that doesn't have name recognition in this space, like we're global leaders in the other things we do. We sell clay in the electronic fiberglass industry for motherboards and making of chips and stuff. And we are the number one leader in that market in the entire world. And, the Attapulgite business, we are the very top number one for the way we manufacture Attapulgite in an air float system. We are the world leader in that product category. And we are a top 40 exporter out of the United States. That means we ship so many containers of material around the world out of our plants that of all the companies in the United States, we're in the top 40 of those companies because we send so much material to the world. So we have an incredible organization here. But in the concrete space, we're relatively new. So when you don't have that name brand and nobody's heard from you, it's a really good idea to be competitive on price. And so we had to make it easy to use. We had to make it affordable. So we established they had a pain, that we could solve the pain, made it easy to use, and made it affordable. And we could satisfy those things along with the fact that we have a technical staff that's attentive to their needs and actually knows what they're talking about. Now you got a chance to build a business.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see how when you were getting into the definitely the chemistry side of things on at the beginning, I was like, ooh, how do you explain all that to someone and convince them to utilize the product? I think you got to kind of show them the end result, right? So I'm sure you had to stick your neck out there a couple times and say, I'll buy a couple trucks with our stuff in it and show you what it can do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so when we're talking to somebody for the first time, we had to stop using all the big fancy science words. Like, that wasn't impressing anybody. It was confusing people. When it came to dosing the product, it couldn't be complicated about it. It was like, oh, no, you just use the same equipment you're using now. We're going to give you a direct feed dispenser and a poly tank, and it's going to be wired in the PLC, and Bob's your uncle. Just, super easy. And then and you say, okay, well, what am I looking for in a change? Oh, we're going to swap those sands. We're going to put our stuff in at this dose rate, and you're going to see the concrete looks exactly the same as it did before. And they're like, really? Like, yeah, it's going to look exactly the same. And I'm like, okay. Well, and when you can make it that simple, that the systems are familiar, the changes to the mix design are easy, and your customer's going to be happy, and then they can look at the bottom line, and they're like, well, that's a more favorable bottom line than we had 24 minutes ago. And nobody's complaining. We didn't have any callbacks. Strengths were great. Strengths didn't go up. Strengths didn't go down. There's normal. Concrete looks normal, but we're using a byproduct in there instead of the natural sand. All those things are better. And hey, if you're solving a pain at the same time, I get into conversations with some people that are not in our company, outside of our company. Yeah, they want to insist that the pains they're solving with their product have this incredible value. People should be willing to pay for all that value. And I'm like, no, people want their problem solved, and they don't want to be price gouged. And they want to know there's a way to do this that is not going to break the bank. And by the way, in a lot of these markets, it doesn't break the bank. It actually saves you money. So if you're a guy like me that has a product that you think is incredible, and you have a team of talented concrete people, and you really need someone to take a chance on you in the concrete space where everybody's super conservative and resistant to change, let's give them something that's going to save them some money while we solve their pain. And that's how we're able to get into so many places so quickly.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. We are not ones to spend more than we have to.
You and I just had an hour conversation before we hit the record button on this podcast. How much of that was complaining about how much prices have gone up?
Yeah.
It was like a solid 15 minutes of our conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're all dealing with it, but we got to understand that. Thought I lost you. Got to understand that, like you said, you might not want to say it, but I'll say it. But that we sell a commodity, and got to understand that we got to find ways to, and that's kind of the origin of this podcast. And I know on your guys' podcast you talk about too is finding better ways to pour concrete and make it competitive against other building materials that are out there. Not make it a premium cost material. I mean, that's how concrete really took over early, and really in the United States in the early 1900s. It was the cheapest building material, and it was easy to use. And I think we're getting away from that. I think we're chasing maybe more profits than we're used to, because we're seeing other building materials. Their prices are going sky high, and we are chasing it as well. But again, like you and I talked for an hour about before the podcast started, was the challenges of each thing that has increased in cost because of the crazy world we live in right now, and someone's got to pay for that too. So it's a fine balancing act.
Yeah, I'm never scared to call concrete a commodity, because I'm a big believer in a spade's a spade. And it's true, the concrete producers don't like hearing that it's commodity. They like to think they've got a better mousetrap. The problem is whether a product is or is not defined as a commodity is not up to the producer. It's up to the buyer. So the customers believe that if they buy from concrete company A or concrete company B, that they're getting the same thing. And some of that is rooted in reality. And, if there's only one quarry in the town, then they know where you're getting your rock from. And if there's one sand plant, and everybody knows what the closest sand plant is, it's probably where you're getting your sand from. And cement's also viewed as a commodity. So whether or not one guy's using, one cement supplier versus another doesn't make a hill of beans to the brother that's got his crew out there laying the sidewalks. All right, so they're looking for price competitive advantages, and that in that scenario, concrete, which is the world we live in, concrete is defined as a commodity. What's interesting when you're working as a producer in a commodity business, you try to set yourself apart. So you want to go out there and you want to have the best service, you want the best technical guys, because you're trying to build that brand loyalty. So you want to make sure people know that you know what you're talking about, and you're going to be there for them if something does go wrong. And to me, that's where you have your built-in advantages as a commodity producer, is on the service side. And so that's where a lot of people are trying to make some hay on the margin side of things. But if you look at the NRMCA benchmark study, I think the first one I ever saw was from 2005 or 2004. And that study showed the average profit on a ready-mix concrete company in this country was 2.3%.
Mm-hmm.
That was the average margin, 2.3%. Brother, there's some savings accounts you can go get right now. You don't have to put your $2 million into buying a concrete plant. You can go put it in one of these banks and make 2.3% on your money, right? You don't have to go through the headache of making concrete. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is don't be average. Go out there and be one of the better guys. And so the top 10% of earners, their average was 14%. That was the margin. But that's still not crazy. That's not that much higher than running a restaurant. Mm-hmm. And restaurants are notorious for not being able to make profit and stay open for very long. But most concrete plants are around for decades. So these guys are running a commodity-based business, and they're doing their very best to make profits for their company. And most of that's coming from a sales and technical side more than anything.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's definitely companies out there that separate themselves with service, and that does go a long way. Even just keeping your trucks clean and things like that, and showing up when you say you're going to show up. But everybody's got to. I'm not saying it's all on supplier side. I think we all got to do our part to keep things in check. But I think that's a good spot for us to end today, Paul. I would like to take a moment and ask everyone, please check out Paul, Josh, and on the Add 10 Gallons podcast. I was on their podcast, like I said earlier this year, and I'm a listener. It's good podcast, a little bit different than mine, which is good. But other than that, do you want to share with folks how to get a hold of you and where to tune in to your podcast and where to learn more about your company?
Yeah, thanks, Seth. So you can find me personally on LinkedIn, Paul Fendley. You'll see my last name spelled in the title of this episode. So if you find me on LinkedIn, please connect with me. I'd love to hear from you. Definitely check out our podcast, the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast. We love talking all things concrete. Just to let everybody know on here, although Seth and I did a deep dive here on the Actigel products, so they would come in here and extol those virtues. You'll find when you listen to our podcast that is not Actigel centric. I don't want you thinking you're just going to come listen to an hour and a half long advertisement every time you turn on our show. Our show is about the industry. We're here to have fun. We're going to be smart, original, funny, authentic, and come and everything be centered around the concrete industry. So we make fun of each other. We have entertaining guests, and we ask the questions, not just the softball questions Seth gave me here today. And I appreciate you taking it easy on me, brother. We ask our guests some pretty tough questions sometimes, but it's all in the spirit of getting really down to business of what is it that we're doing to make the industry better. And so you've got guys who, like Seth, are big proponents of this industry, and we're a big believer that rising tides lift all boats. And Seth was only like 6 episodes deep when we called him, but we knew right away after 6 episodes, like, all right, this guy, he's on to something with his podcast. different from ours for sure in format and stuff, but at the end of the day, we want as many of our listeners to go over and listen to Seth, and I appreciate you suggesting that your listeners come check us out.
Yeah, man. No, it's like I said, I listened to it, and it's I listen to a bunch of different podcasts, but there's only a couple of the concrete ones out there, so gotta tune in and listen, and like we said, I think those guys do the same that we try to do here, and try to have at least one thing that everyone can learn from each episode. So, but Paul, I appreciate you coming on today, and we're gonna have to do it again.
Sounds great, brother. So everybody go to activeminerals.com. That's activeminerals.com. Check us out. You can find our products there, including the Actigel 208. Seth, absolute pleasure, brother. Anytime you want to have me. You know what? Next time, let's get the whole crew on here. Let's get the Active crew on the show, and we'll make it a real party over here at Concrete Closet.
As long as Joey's not hunting, I think that we can make that happen, right?
You're the only guy I know that's got a better beard than he does. So I kind of enjoyed being able to see this handlebar mustache you got on top of this glorious beard, man. For the folks at home that can't see it, you're really missing out.
Oh, man. We definitely got into the podcast now. All right, man. Thanks.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another Concrete Logic podcast episode. If you got some value out of this or you enjoyed it, please share it with others. And if you could take a moment and give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app, I would appreciate it. We will catch you on the next episode. And now Mike Dunton's going to take us out.
That alarm always sings couple hours before the sun comes up. Open up the side, put some diesel in the lights, and wait till the trucks roll up. Yeah, this ain't how most folks live their lives, dripping in sweat, working overtime. But while they're tying their ties for their 9-to-5s, we're out here changing these skylines with wood, iron, and mud. We work hard for a dollar, give thanks to the Lord above. Never make a man do something you can't prove. Hard work calls for a drink or two. Expect more, it's written in our blood. With wood, iron, and mud. From the swamps to the city, from the Lone Star heat to the woods of the Georgia pine. Good old boys and girls who ain't afraid of getting dirty for a clean time. And if you want to see the fire in a grown man's eyes beneath the hot summer sun, find the wild-eyed boys clocking days and nights, working hard to get that job done.